Greetings and welcome. I'm going to continue my Bible study series on little sins and large calamities. So this is going to be part 2 of the video, um, which is going to be titled Light Punishment and Heavy Despair. I'm going to read that passage that I did at the end of the previous video, just so you can get caught up again. So Joshua chapter 7, verse 4. It says, So there went up thither of the people about 3,000 men, and they fled before the men of Ai. And the men of Ai smote of them about 36 men, for they chased them from before the gate even unto Shebarim, and smote them in the going down. Wherefore the hearts of the people melted, and became as water. And Joshua rent his clothes, and fell to the earth upon his face, before the ark of the Lord until the eventide, he and the elders of Israel, and put dust upon their heads. And Joshua said, Alas, O Lord God, wherefore hast thou at all brought this people over Jordan to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites, to destroy us? Would to God we had been content, and dwelt on the other side Jordan. O Lord, what shall I say when Israel turneth their backs before their enemies? Okay, so yeah, there's quite a lot to say here. So let's look at verse 4. So the Jews only gathered about 3,000 people. Later, you'll find out that I actually had 12,000 people in it. So now I know that in that 12,000, there are probably women and children. So maybe the odds weren't quite like 4-1, but chances are the people there still outnumbered. Let's say 2-1. Let's say the army, the Jews would have been outnumbered 2-1. And the Jews thought, yeah, those sound like good odds. We've got God on our side, and we'll be fine. But the truth is, God wasn't on their side, right? Yeah, God was not on their side, because as you know, Achan sinned, so God's blessings left. And what's interesting here in verse 5, it says, and the men of Ai smote of them about 36 men, and they chased them. They kept chasing them. So the Jews, the Israelites, they only lost 36 men. So out of their 2,000 or 3,000 person army, which is a very small fraction of their entire, all their forces, they lost 36 men, which, it's still 36 men, but that's it. That's like a small, they lost like, what did I put? 1.2% of their troops. So if they had their max size, if 3,000 men, and they lost 36, so they lost 1.2% of that little force that they sent, which isn't even their entire army. And that was enough to scare them. So that's it. They just lost a tiny fraction, just a tiny fraction of their forces. And that was enough for them to get scared and run back. And the men of Ai kept running after them. This is the same Israelite army that defeated Jericho against overwhelming odds, against this wall that was just impenetrable, and you couldn't get through. And God brought them that victory. But this little village with hardly any people in it, that was enough to scare them. That was enough to scare them back. And this illustrates a very good point. Without the Lord, you are nothing. The Lord's blessings upon you, it is so easy to lose them if you don't take it seriously, if you don't take what the Lord does seriously. It is so easy to lose everything. The Lord's blessings, because you don't take it for granted. Don't take for granted that the Lord will always be with you, that He'll always back you up. If you don't stay close to the Lord in prayer, then it's so easy to lose all of that. So here, basically what I wrote here in my notes is that losing those 36 men in that little battle, that's like a cat scratch. Like, it's hardly anything. And their entire forces, I think, were like 600,000. So the army of the Israelites, the whole army, not just the little force of 2,000 or 3,000 that they sent. No, the entire army, they had like 600,000 men, I believe, and so they just lost like 36 people out of that. It's like a fraction, it's like a cat scratch. And they shouldn't have done anything to them, but no, 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 no. That was enough to scare them. So you're gonna get weak against something like a pebble. Like you're gonna stumble over a pebble because that's what happens when you don't have the Lord on your side. That's how weak you become without the Lord. And it doesn't matter. You could have had amazing victories in the past, and you will lose to something weak just because you get careless. Something small. So like I said, it's like a cat scratch. It's like a cat scratching you. That's the effect of what just happened on the Israelites' army, which is nothing compared to what they've been through, what they've suffered in Egypt, what the Lord brought them to. All of this wandering through the desert, the 40 years, the plagues, all of that. They went through so much. And well, most of it was probably the generation before them, but they went through so much. The Israelites went through so much. So this little flick, this little village scared them. It was enough to scare them. And they went back and they ran. And in verse 6 it says, and Joshua rent his clothes. I always think it's very interesting in the Bible throughout. You can always see them, like it says, and they rent their clothes. Like I always imagined it like they would just like tear their shirt. Well, they wouldn't really have shirts, but I just thought it was very interesting. They just like rip their clothes or something. But it says they rent their clothes. That's a very common occurrence, a very common phrase you'll see throughout the Old Testament, where someone just becomes sad and they just like rent their clothes. And I don't know if what they do is like they rip off a part of their garment or something, but and they're in sackcloth and ashes. So that's like, I guess like it's just like very not very cool looking clothes, just very old clothes, and this the ashes on top, like they just want to say they're like in mourning. And this is a very common occurrence. They put dust upon their heads. So this is a very common occurrence that the Jews would do. The whole, they rent their clothes. You'll see it throughout the Old Testament. Upon his face before the ark of the Lord, and even tied to heal the elders in Israel. So now they're scared. So now, after this, small failure, a small setback. Joshua and the elders, though, they take it seriously. All of a sudden, they realize something's wrong. We just lost against this little village in the middle of nowhere, whereas, which doesn't make any sense. Logically, it makes no sense at all. Why did we lose against a little tiny village? So Joshua and the elders, they take that to heart. They notice something is wrong immediately, which I will say is very good for Joshua and all the elders there. They recognize that the Lord is not with them. Something is wrong. When you're close to the Lord, when something like that happens, something small, something's just a little off, you notice it. Now, a fool, if they had been fools like some of the other people in the past, when you run into a problem or stumbling block like that, you keep going. So if they had been dumb, they would have just kept trying to fight they would have been kept trying to win when God told them they're not going to win, and they would just keep doing stuff they're not supposed to be doing because, follow the Lord's directions. So Joshua and the elders, though, they noticed something's off. So I will give them credit for that. They did know something was wrong, that the Lord's blessing was off of them. They did notice that. Joshua said, Alas, O Lord God, wherefore hast thou at all brought this people over Jordan to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites to destroy us? Would to be God made me content and dwelt on our side Jordan. Okay, now I will say, Joshua realized something was wrong, but this is literally, he's overreacting. I will say he's overreacting. Yes, there are challenges in life. Things will go wrong, but when you run into like a small setback, if you start freaking out that like this is the end of the world and oh no, the Lord's not with me and all this, like if God already told you to do it and the Lord's on your side, then it's going to work. So just because you run into a little trial or tribulation, you trip over a pebble or a rock, you trip over a small rock, all of a sudden you think it's the end of the world and you got to run back. Like Like he literally overreacts. He says, "Oh, let's go back to the South Jordan." He's literally telling them, like almost literally, "Let's go back to like Egypt. Like let's go back. Like Israel, no, we're gonna stay away. We're gonna go back to the other side Jordan." And that is how weak our flesh is. It is so easy for us when we run into some troubles, all of a sudden go, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know if I want to do that." Um, at the first sight of trouble or something scary, just a little bit. Oh, I'm back off. It's too much. We can't handle this. And this is Joshua. Like this is Joshua. Like this is someone who literally was bold, him and Caleb, when he went with the other 10 men to, the promised land. And Joshua and Caleb, they stood up for what's right. They were outnumbered. They were in the minority, but they said what's right. They said, no, God's with us. We can do this. We can conquer this land. It's ours. God said it's ours. Let's trust the Lord. And the majority, they didn't listen to them. So this is Caleb and Joshua. Like this is Joshua. Like this is the man Moses gave his power, his reins of power to. This is Moses's top disciple, basically, Joshua. And Joshua is freaking out because of this. He is concerned. So this just shows it doesn't matter how much experience you have. It doesn't matter how long you've been preaching, a pastor, all of that. I mean, that's good. Experience is good. Experience will get you through trouble and trials. Experience helps you remember to trust the Lord. If you have experiences where you trusted the Lord and he made things work out for you, then you have confidence that builds up your confidence to continue to trust in the Lord. You have that confidence, you have that experience. But that does not make you immune to stumbling and becoming weak. And this is what happened to Joshua here. He had a moment of weakness where he was in the flesh. He prayed, obviously, sacrifice. So he knew something was wrong. I will give that's good. He knew something was wrong. But he probably, I think, overreacted just a bit. Like saying oh Lord, what have we done? There's something wrong. That would have been fine. But to say oh, did you come out here to get us killed? Oh, it would have been better for us to be on the other side Jordan. Like, no, that's going a little too far, because he literally, God made promises. God promised them that they would make it to the other side of Jordan, to the promised land. And God promised it. If God promised it, it's going to happen. So if God promises you something and he promised it, he called you to do something, then he's not going to take that back. He promised it to you. So if he promised you, then you have no business going back on it, because he promised it. It's going to happen. So yeah, Joshua definitely overreacted here. So it's very important not to overreact. And it's good. It's good that he realized it, because he realized there was a problem. And as I already mentioned, some people don't. Like Pharaoh did not notice there was a problem. When there are all these plagues on his people, God made it very clear to Pharaoh that you should let his people go. Made it very, very clear. But Pharaoh kept arguing. Pharaoh kept thinking, well, what if? I don't know. Like, I don't want to lose like so many good, valuable workers. My economy is going to suffer. All this, he's probably thinking all these things. And no matter how many things went wrong, Pharaoh just psycho, crazy. That's what sin does. Sin makes people go crazy. You assume people are logical. No, people are not logical. When people get possessed with sin and they do stupid stuff. They do crazy stuff. They do stuff that doesn't make any sense. Pharaoh did stuff that didn't make any sense. That's what sin will do to you. You cannot rely on your own logic. People that get caught up with sin, their perception of reality just becomes completely warped. Like they just do not see things the way they really are anymore. And that will happen to you if you get caught up with your own sins. And you don't confess them before the Lord. So yeah, so basically, this is just some so Joshua's getting a little weak here. He had a moment of weakness. Let's go back. Like what he just says in verse 7 is exactly what he was criticizing it with against the others 40 years earlier, like, or even more than that. So as you can see, I think he's probably a little older. Maybe he's not on top of his game. Let's just put it that way. Joshua, right now, moment of weakness. He's just not on top of his game. He's not on top of his like spiritual game. And Jotham said, verse 8, O Lord, what shall I say when Israel turneth their backs before their enemies? It's like, oh, we ran back. What are we going to do now? And it's like, well, yeah. So, there's two things to figure out here. Okay, number one, maybe we did something wrong. That's good. It's good Joshua's realized. Maybe we did something wrong. Let's find out. Let's pray to the Lord. Let's find out. But number two, don't overreact. Trials and tribulations are normal. Just because you had a bad day, just because some trial or tribulation happened, doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong with the Lord. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. That's between you and the Lord, and also it's not for other people to judge, Just because someone has so many things go wrong in their lives does not mean that they're wrong with the Lord. Okay, this is not some prosperity gospel thing. Like, oh, if you're right with the Lord, you're going to be a millionaire. No, you're not. There's plenty of people in the Bible that were good men and women of the Lord, and they never became close to millionaires. They were impoverished. They impoverished their whole life. Apostle Paul was not rich. Jesus Christ was not rich. So God himself was not rich. Okay, God manifested in the flesh, lived in poverty. He lived a pretty humble life. Okay, so if that is who you're going to use as a pinnacle of greatness, then why are you going the other direction and saying that we have to become rich, wealthy? God promised us wealth. No, God didn't promise you any of that. So that's the prosperity gospel. That's not in the Bible. Okay. So there's nothing wrong with having money, but it is not a measurement of spirituality at all. It's not. More than likely, those riches will take you away from the Lord. If you do not guard your heart appropriately, those riches will take you away from the Lord. So, half-hearted spirituality, basically, I think I've said everything I wanted to say here, but you need to keep a balanced, temperate approach. Like, I don't know how many times I've said it, but you need to be balanced. You need to be sober-minded in how you approach things. Don't overreact. Things happen in life. You ask yourself, you ask the Lord, why did this happen? You pray. You find out why. You go to the Lord and you find out why. You look for answers from the Lord. Don't rush to conclusions. Do not rush to conclusions. Go to the Lord first. So let's continue. One more thing I wanted to point out here. Having a smaller army win over a bigger one is, it's actually happened many times in history. And so the Jews could have easily won, right? Easily. They had way more people. They just sent like a little small army because they were overconfident, and they got scared off by a little village, and they hardly lost any people. Now, historically though, small armies could win over a big one, if they use their wit. Like I have an illustration here written down, but there was a battle called the Battle of Salt Sioux River where Korea defeated China. This was back in like 600 AD. And so yeah, Korea defeated China, and China had like 300,000 soldiers, and Korea had like way less than that. Now, why did Korea win? Several reasons. China just didn't have the proper equipment. They weren't, poorly trained. And the general of the Koreans was a pretty brilliant guy. He allowed the Chinese to get closer to where the water was shallow, and then he opened up the dam and basically drowned out the other army. So So historically, there have been plenty of examples of this small army defeating a bigger army. And if the smaller army has a general that is pretty smart, knows what they're doing. And that's how it is with the Lord. The Lord is smarter than any general. So even if you are outnumbered and if you're outnumbered completely by the enemy, it doesn't matter because you have the Lord on your side. So the Lord is a billion. It's an infinite number of soldiers. So it doesn't matter what your enemy is, what your opponents are. As long as the Lord's on your side, you've won. You basically won. The Lord will get you through any of those trials. So anyway, I just wanted to end with that. I think I'll briefly start the next verse. Let's see, Joshua 7:25. So I still haven't even gotten to the main issue that they still don't know Achan's in trouble. They still don't know that Achan is in trouble. That Achan is what caused them the trouble. So I'm going to need like another video for this probably. So let's see, Joshua 7:25, it says, and Joshua said, why hast thou troubled us? The Lord shall trouble thee this day. And all Israel stoned him with stones and burned them with fire after they had stoned them with stones. So I pretty much skipped I skipped the verses basically where it shows what happened, but just to illustrate what happened. Yeah, I mean, if you want, you can read all of Joshua chapter 7 to understand what happened. But Joshua and the elders prayed. God gave them an answer, said that, there was a sin committed in the camp, and they cast lots, and eventually it ended up being Achan. And Achan, he confessed his sin. So let's see, let me read that. Let's see, Nanjas and Judah have sinned against the Lord. Yeah, so let me read it here. Glory to the God of Israel, make confession to me, tell me. Yeah, let's see, let's read from verse 19. From verse 19, I'll just, I'll briefly explain what happened. And Joshua said unto Achan, my son, give, I pray thee, glory to the Lord God of Israel, and make confession unto him, and tell me now what thou hast done. Hide it not from me. And Achan answered Joshua and said, indeed, I have sinned against the Lord God of Israel, and thus have I done. Verse 21. When I saw among the spoils a goodly Babylonish garment, and 200 shekels of silver, and a wedge of gold of 50 shekels weight, then I coveted them, and took them, and behold, they are hid in the earth in the midst of my tent, and the silver under it. So Joshua sent messengers, and they ran onto the tent, and behold, it was hid in his tent, and the silver under it. And they took him out of the midst of the tent, and brought them unto Joshua, and unto all the children of Israel, and laid them out before the Lord. And Joshua and Israel, and all Israel with him, took Achan the son of Zerah, and the silver, and the garment, and the wedge of gold, and his sons, and his daughters, and his oxen, and his asses, and his sheep, and his tent, and all that he had, and they brought them unto the valley of Achor. And Joshua said, why hast thou troubled us? The Lord shall trouble thee this day. And all Israel stoned him with stones, and burned them with fire, after they had stoned them with stones. Verse 26. And they raised over him a great heap of stones unto this day. So the Lord turned from the fierceness of his anger, wherefore the name of that place was called the Valley of Achor unto this day. Okay, so I said a lot there. Just to give some more clarification, because just reading verse 25 by itself wasn't really explaining what happened. So he coveted, like I explained earlier in the past video. Achan coveted, and he caused problems for a lot of people. 36 people died because of him. I mean, that just illustrates what happened. Sin, it spreads. Just because he wanted some gold, some silver, some garment, some spoils that he wasn't supposed to touch. That's what covetousness does. He coveted, desiring things that he shouldn't be desiring. So he got the stuff that he wanted. So temporarily, he won out, right? Temporarily. That's what sin does. Sin temporarily rewards you. And he probably didn't even really get to do anything with that gold or money yet, or just had some clothes. That's it. You're going to lose your life over that? It's not worth it. Sin isn't worth it. Sin will always take away from you more than it gave you. So it's not worth it. Like all this little stuff, it just became meaningless. He lost way more than he put into it. More than he got out. And he lost everything. So he and his family, because his family was part of it, they didn't take care of it. They were, can't say colluding with him. I mean, it was his decision, but they could have stopped this from escalating. Before they went to Ai, they should have already known. Hey, the Lord told us, that we shouldn't be uh, grabbing stuff or it was spoiled. Like they were aware of what Achan did, of his sin. So Achan lost everything. Everything got burned. That's what God does with sin. He burns it and everything associated with it. And so that Achan is basically like, let me just symbolize it. Symbolically, it represents the cancerous sin that is in your life. It's that little tart. It's one family. So Achan had to die in his family so that the rest of the Jews could go and they fight effectively. Until Achan and his family died, that couldn't have happened. So you have some Achan, you have some sin in your life that could be small, some small thing, a little small thing that is preventing you from serving the Lord effectively. It's something small. It could be something small. It could be something big, but in this case, it's just Achan. It's just one family. Out of a myriad, out of a million person country, just one family that created a problem for everybody else. And one man could do so much damage. We have so many examples of dictators. Just one man causing so much problems for everybody else. That those problems go on for ages, for centuries. Just all the damage and how many deaths and countries that are destroyed just because one man said, hey, let's go to war. How many evil dictators in the past have said that? Well, on a personal level, you might have something inside of you that is causing you problems. That's going to cause you problems, sin problems for yourself, your life, but also for those around you, because you're not living the life you should be living for the Lord, and your actions are going to affect others. Your sin is going to negatively affect others. That's what Achan did here. So that's why he had to be stoned and burned, and everything that he owned, all the stuff, got burned with him and his family. And that is how God deals with sin. That's how God deals with sin. That's how you should deal with your own personal sin. To destroy it that much, incinerate it. And the reason we have problems in our lives is because we don't incinerate the sin. You have to incinerate it, destroy it completely so that it doesn't come back. We just kind of like half destroy it, but we leave some of it in our lives, and it's just going to come back. If you don't destroy it completely, it's just going to keep coming back. It needs to be incinerated. That's how God treats sin. We don't treat it like that. Those of us that do treat our sin like that, those are the ones that become great men. Those are the ones that become great preachers and pastors. Those are the ones God can really use. The ones that incinerate the sin in their lives and trust the Lord. So that's what I call a tiny sacrifice and a massive blessing. So you sacrifice a little bit, just the small part of you that's just not right with the Lord, and you get a massive blessing in return. And we're going to talk about that later, about that massive blessing. So I'm going to read 8:13 and 8:25. So 8:13 and 8:25. So Joshua 8:13. And when they had set the people, even all the host that was on the north of the city, and their liers in wait on the west of the city, Joshua went that night into the midst of the valley. Verse 25. And so it was that all that fell that day, both of men and women, were 12,000, even all the men of Ai. And I don't think let's see, did I skip the verse? All the host that was in the north of the city and their lives in way to the west of the city, Joshua went. So in verse 13, it says that they finally decided to fight the men of Ai. So Achan was taken care of. They dealt with the sin. And now that they were right with the Lord, they went and they fought against Ai. And this time they over-prepared. Let me show you the verse. Do I have it here? If it doesn't, like, ambush. So yeah, I mean, if you want to read chapter 8, it goes into details about like their battle strategy and everything in chapter 8. But what happened here was they actually had 30,000 men. So they actually sent, I think if you add up all the men, they had like ambushes set up all around the city. And they had this complicated battle strategy this time around. It wasn't just like, oh yeah, let's just send 3,000 men and fight. No, no, no. They were over prepared this time. They were like, we're going to win this. We're not going to get cocky. We're going to not be overconfident. We're going to over prepare. So they were, this time around, they went the exact opposite. They had 30,000 men. There were 12,000 people there. So this time they were like, okay, we outnumber them now. Like 2.5 to 1. Like they made sure they were outnumbering them. They would also ambush them. And they had this complicated battle strategy this time around. And they won. They obviously won this time around. And, you know, they got the city and everything. So this time around, they went the exact opposite. Instead of being overconfident, they were underconfident. They were like, we're going to trust the Lord with this one. We're going to make sure this is done right. And we're going to be OCD about this. We're going to be OCD. We're not just going to like go like that. No, we're going to make sure everything is as it should be. And we're going to double and triple check everything. That's the attitude that you take when you approach the Lord. You approach the Lord's word like that, living close to the Lord. You approach it like that, with that OCD attitude. You need to be a little bit like that. Pay attention to details, detail-oriented. God is a very detail-oriented God. The God of the universe, very intelligent, pays attention to small little details that we just completely miss. So it's very important to pay attention to details. There's a lot of little tidbits in the Bible that you'll just miss because you're not reading the verse carefully. But if God is a very detail-oriented God. So this time around, they were like, we're going to be super prepared, and we are not going to mess this up. And God blessed them. Yes, God blessed them because they did what the Lord told them to do. So this time they're over-prepared. So don't overestimate your enemies. Don't. Trust the Lord. It doesn't matter how many successes you've had in the past. You can always fail. If without the Lord, you can always fail. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing this, how smart you think you are, whatever. None of that matters. Without the Lord, you'll just fall. You'll stumble. You will stumble over a pebble. You will stumble over a pebble. You will trip over a pebble, and you will embarrass yourself. And it'll be even more embarrassing because of how overconfident you were. So the higher you go up, the farther you can fall. So just don't, always stay humble, always stay close to the Lord. So yeah, I think I've said everything I wanted to say. So just don't get overconfident. I think I managed to wrap this up in 2 videos. Next time I am going to talk about, I'm going to have a few Bible studies. I'm going to talk about the scriptures, the inspiration of the scriptures. That is going to take a few videos. And then after that, I'm going to talk about the doctrine of Satan. And that's also going to be a few videos. So I've got 2 pretty lengthy topics coming up. So I think hopefully people find them interesting. So yeah, I'm just going to keep doing this. So I'll see you next time.